Milan ou Tripoli, Vilnius ou Benghazi, Paris, Moscou, on fait le boonga, boonga. Bangkok ou Bogota, Le Caire ou Jakarta, Gustavia, on fait le boonga, boonga.
Hello, welcome to BungaCast, the global politics podcast at the end of history. Hello, dear patrons. This is, of course, BungaCast with Philip Cunliffe.
Hello.
George Hoare.
Hey.
And myself, Alex Hochuli. And this is another Aufhebonus bonus. If you're new to the podcast, and especially if you're new to our subscriber content, this is where we deal with your questions and comments and posts, which we've received over the past month or 2 months, and discuss them, which is what we're going to do here. So we've got actually a lot to get through because last one we did was in early December. So plenty to get through, lots of comments, lots of episodes which generated a bit of controversy or things that you liked, things that you didn't like. So yeah, let's get cracking. We're going to start back to front. We're going to start with the last Aufhebonus bonus from December of last year, number 307. So Richard R. firstly says, in reference to a discussion that we had on that episode about escalating plunder, about the role of the state in helping capital effectively claim resources or capture parts of production into, and privatize it. So one claim made by David Harvey, or a David Harveyite claim that seems unaddressed, Richard R. says, is that the plunder is in large part the privatization of things like schools that have already gone through the process of capitalist commodification and then socialization into publicly owned schools. So that is to say, they're private schools and then they become public schools. They become nationalized, I guess. So it's less a new market and not a new commodity. It would be especially curious how this fits in with Phil's claim that daycare has been effectively socialized. Is BungaCast officially a piece with the Democratic Party? Is everything government-owned socialist now? Phil, if you want to respond to that, but also parse that a little bit.
Well, it's in answer to Richard, BungaCast is definitely not a piece with the Democratic Party. Alex probably is, and George might well be a sleeper for the Democratic Party, but I am definitely not. I can assure you, Richard, that I do not believe that everything government-owned is socialist. It's not what I didn't actually say daycare had been socialized. What I said was the family has been socialized. So the idea of some revolt against the patriarchal nuclear family is meaningless in the context in which you have women having ready access to the labor market, having rights to inherit property, and that their rights are defended in divorce courts and whatnot, and generally have achieved, in substantive measure, particularly once you break up the kind of demographic generational cohorts, women of but a certain cutoff have achieved, effective equality with men in most spheres. And so in that context, the idea of this patriarchal authoritarian family doesn't make any sense. And part of that is that you have childcare, right? I mean, my point was that childcare is socialized, by which I mean the care of the child is socialized, not that daycare is something which is, a harbinger of a socialist future. Doubtless, like, what we call childcare in the UK or daycare in the US, doubtless, it could be funded better, it could be made free, it could be improved in all sorts of ways. But the basic proposition was that the child rearing has effectively already been socialized. That was it.
Yeah, not the provision of the service. Yeah, and I think it's also good. It should. I've been guilty of this, of using the term commodification sometimes for things, or it's been decommodified or commodified, referring to things which maybe, for example, like the National Health Service, which is free at the point of service. It's not, doesn't mean that it's not a commodity. It's that it's subsidized by, or that the supply chain is fully commoditized. There's people buying and selling goods and services. It's just that at the point that you consume that service, it is something which has been subsidized by some other element of production, I guess.
Yeah, and in my reading of a lot of, I don't know what Richard has in mind, but my reading, say, of the, development of kind of mass schooling across the developed world isn't one that, it kind of it was private and then became socialized and now is being kind of privatized again. That's not the way I understood it. As in a as I don't think you could generalize at that level on the developed or across the developed world.
I have a Žižekian point. It may be like sub-Žižekian, but you can have a decommodified commodity. This makes sense, right? That something which is still a commodity has the aura of having been decommodified, and then that can subsequently be recommodified. So you can have like a recommodified, decommodified commodity. That would be my response. Such as healthcare that is a commodity and then is decommodified by being socially provisioned and then is privatized afterwards, or like public utilities in Britain. You didn't seem convinced, Alex, but I think
we can just call it privatization and be done with it.
Okay, maybe that's simpler. Yeah, maybe that's better.
Kind of a related point actually comes from Andrea, and here is where the argument about the expropriation of capitalists by other capitalists would come in place, argues Andrea. If we would assume that a wide array of welfare state industries and services were effectively just mediated kinds of capitalist enterprises organized by the state, and that the gratuity, so things being provided free, of the commodities were actually just a mere mediated way of producing and distributing things made under the wage relation in a capitalist society, then the privatization of those industries and institutions have actually been expropriated from one capitalist by another. So, in a sense, what Harveyites think of as accumulation by dispossession in Western countries would actually be a recurring and structural feature of capitalism. It's just that it's not in the moralistic way it's been put forward by many.
I think Andre's right, it's a very clever insight, and I suspect it's probably right about a lot of this discussion, in fact.
Okay, so we're going to move on to the episode 308. This is also from December last year, A Balance Sheet of the Left, which is where we read this long essay by Jordan Therborn on basically the state of the left in the 21st century. There was also an article which we put in the links, which was there for discussion, was one by Perry Anderson, which had been written back in 2000. And in reference to both of those, Eli says, is there a conflation being made between strategy and goals in the Therborn and Anderson articles? I've seen a number of millennial left self-critiques that say, in so many words, that all the goals and projects of the left were perfectly fine. And the only thing to critique were the tactics and strategies that allowed the perfect project to fail. Eli says he's thinking here of Ben Burgess's post-Bernie self-criticisms of the Democratic Socialists of America. It has the flavor of the left cannot be wrong, only be wronged. And so this is also, kind of discussed in the context of the idea that the millennial left failed to overcome, supposedly, the challenges and setbacks that the new left suffered. So no real deeper questioning of whether the new left's goals should be the left's goals today.
Yeah, I think this
or were indeed with the correct ones back then. Yeah,
I think this is spot on by Eli. That there is kind of a tendency. I don't think it's, to be fair, I suppose. I don't think it's specific to the left. I think that there is a tendency to, in fact, the way in which we normally talk about strategy. Well, I say we, not we on BungaCast, but we as kind of the public as a whole. The way in which strategy is talked about tends to, in fact, conflate tactics and strategy, whether that be when it's talked about in military operational terms or even in business terms or political terms. Nobody seems to know the difference, I think, between those different levels. And I think Eli is right, in fact, that it's kind of, and this is, the point, this is what frustrates me about so many of these discussions. When they talk about leftist strategy, it's basically, post-grad students moving around imaginary pieces on a board like Hitler in his bunker, imaginary armies that actually bear no correspondence to anything in the real world, as if there are, as if little chess pieces of organized kind of unions or political parties that have some kind of relationship with each other across borders. And they're talking about leftist strategy as if they're the ones in a position to move these pieces. When the pieces don't exist, nobody knows what the game is. And, what are the goals? Are they to simply kind of fulfill the to make good the failures of the new left, or or something else, something that goes beyond that. So the failure to kind of differentiate and clarify the difference between goals and strategy, I think that is does bedevil those who think of themselves as on the left, and it's not accidental.
I'm not so sure I agree. I think there is an extent to which the goals and the projects were right. I don't think it was like, if you think that these were the correct expression of the class interests of the people in the kind of millennial left. And so it's like, yeah, they were correct. They were the correct things, and that people in that class will continue to want those things. So why would you change that? Right. And so it has to be something other than the goals and the projects that's the problem. And I think looking internally is right, but it's the contradictions of the project, of the class contradictions of the project, rather than the failures in sort of strategy or tactics, or how to achieve the goals, if you want to put it in more in less military way. But yeah, I think there is. I wouldn't completely disagree with Eli's point, though. There is, you do have that. It can't be the things that we wanted that are wrong. It must be the world or something else that's wrong.
Yeah.
I would. So, well, but look, I think you've got to start from somewhere, right? So the fact that the people who constitute the current left, the Bernie Bros and all of that, the kind of DSA and all of the, that kind of urban millennial new left, that was the constituency for Bernie and Corbyn. Obviously, they've got like a political interest, right? That would be it would be wrong to think that they don't. But the fact that they never rise above their political interests, the fact that they were never able to sustain a political project that was, could sustain kind of electoral coalitions with the traditional working class voters of the Democrats and the Labour Party, respectively, that speaks to the fact that they failed to clarify whether or not their own goals and how far their own kind of specific goals were simply expressions of their material interests, or whether they went any further.
Yeah.
So I don't think you can criticize them for having kind of class-based interests, but the failure to clarify what their goals could and should be. And this is where, kind of their hostility to free political expression and their terror of rocking the boat and upsetting a ideological consensus got in the way of that kind of basic political task of trying to understand what they wanted and what they could offer to others.
Yeah. No, I think that's right. Even if it meant the state of being, explicit in saying, well, we want social democracy, the claims of democratic socialism, whatever that is, should be put to one side. And to say, okay, well, that we can offer workers something that is a genuinely popular policy, like Medicare for all, but the inability to reckon with the fact that all the kind of woke bureaucratic preening and other kind of pursuits didn't kind of sit together with those, and then couldn't be realistic about what was possible, even strategically, even in that narrow aim, whatever you might think of trying to kind of bring in kind of social democratic reforms and what the possibilities of that are. Hey there, you've reached the end of a short excerpt from an episode that's been released only to our patrons. If you'd like to join us and gain access to around 2 Patreon exclusive episodes a month, please go to patreon.com/bungacast. We'd love to have you.